Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all yet again another Vikings episode review right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, and as always, here to bring you the latest in this week's Vikings episode review. And this is my review of Season 4, Episode 8, entitled Portage. Now, general thoughts on this week's episode. I thought it was a fine episode, definitely a good Fallout episode, given the events that we got in last week's episode. And we got some character deaths this week, a lot of character deaths, some of which were expected, one of which I called, if you remember my previous episode review, and the other one just kind of came out of nowhere, and I do have to question that decision, and I'll get into more detail with that later on in this review. So first and foremost, I want to talk about what I really liked about the episode. Now, Ragnar's plan, the Portage plan, if you will, the idea to transport the boats on land in between the two different waterways, you know, hauling them over the cliff and whatnot. I thought that was a really cool idea. I certainly love the scenes in which we got to see the Vikings operate. We got a lot of overhead crane shots, a lot of wide shots, so that we could see, number one, just what a monumental task this is, transporting these large boats. And I also like, because keep in mind, a lot of this stuff is practical. You know, they actually do build the boats for the show. They actually shoot most of their scenes on location. So, but I mean, just being able to see their contraption, just being able to see their, you know, the pulls, the pulleys, the ropes, the logs, just the whole mechanized system that they used. I thought that was really good. I thought that was really well done in the episode. Also because it does reinforce this idea that the show likes to keep hindering on. They keep challenging the common misconception that Vikings were nothing more but raiders and warriors. No, they're not. These are craftsmen. These are engineers. You know, season 1 and 2, I think, did a really good job at illustrating the point that Vikings were sailors first. You know, they were navigators like no one else could navigate. And seasons 3 and 4, especially with Floki and with his ingenuity, it's really reiterating the point, is reinforcing that idea. It's like, no, these guys were craftsmen, they were engineers, they were geniuses. And I liked how that was implemented again this week. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and let's talk about some of these character deaths that we got this week. Okay, first off, I'm gonna talk about Count Odo. Why? Because I called it. I called it in last week's episode. I said, mark my words, Odo will not make it outside of season 4. The boy didn't even make it outside of the next episode, so I called that. Now, once again, that was one of the expected deaths, though, because they had already set it up, what with the Emperor learning about Odo's treachery and whatnot, and we already know about the incest siblings, if you will, who were pretty much throwing Odo under the bus and using him to, you know, pull information and whatnot. So we knew, and then of course the timing of it all. Why? Because Rollo has just proven himself instrumental in the defeat of the Vikings trying to raid on Paris. So the timing, all of it lined up perfectly for Odo to finally get his. I called it last week, saw it coming. So pretty much what I think about that whole thing and where I think it's going to go so far as the story is concerned moving forward, it's the same thing I said in my previous review. Rollo is now, we now know that he has, you know, the iron hand of the king, and we know that he's in charge of all of Paris's defenses. So he's pretty much replacing Count Odo. That's what I said he would do, and it makes perfect sense. And also, if you take in consideration, giving all the time that they've set up for this, you know, huge showdown between Rollo and Ragnar, yeah, now it's just moving everything forward so we can get to that point. Now we know that's exactly what's going to happen, or at least we have enough to suspect that that's what's going to happen. Now, second character death this week was Gwynthryth. That one, I think, was the most predictable one. And that's because, once again, everything we've gotten up to this point has set that up. I've already said in last week's review, once Ecbert became king of Mercia, there was no reason for him to keep Gwynthryth alive. Also remember, Athelwulf, he's on a pilgrimage. He would have been the only person that would have stopped Ecbert from killing Gwynthryth, and now he's gone. However, surprisingly, it wasn't even Egbert that ended up killing Gwynthryth. It was Judith. Now, granted, that was Gwynthryth's fault because really, after she found out about Egbert taking over Mercia, the only thing that she had to deal with was, oh, you're on house arrest. She brought it upon herself. She took it upon herself to try to take Egbert out, in which case we saw in that scene, Egbert told her, it's like, even if you take me out, my guards are going to take you out with no questions asked. So that whole thing, I mean, it does make sense, and it does also play in line with what we know about Gwynthryth. We do know that she's somewhat crazy. Regardless of how justified or whatnot she would have been, that was a bad move. That was a bad move on her part all ways around, and there was no way for it to end pleasantly. If anything, I would probably say I'm surprised that Egbert didn't just go out and issue it himself. Like, he didn't just order for her to be killed. But then again, he already had the kingdom, so she wasn't much of a threat. It's not like she has an army. It's not like she even has devout followers who would raise armies against Egbert in her name. So all of her support came from Egbert, and it came from King Elia over in Northumberland. So really, I mean, this is what we all should have expected to happen. I will go on note saying, though, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens with Egbert and Elia next week, because apparently, remember what I mentioned before, and remember what we got, I believe, in season 2 when they first talked about invading Mercia. Egbert and Elia, what they were supposed to do was they were supposed to take over Mercia, and then they were supposed to split the kingdom apart to coincide with their respective territories. It seems like Egbert just took the whole kingdom over now, and now Elia's pissed because he's like, oh, you double-crossed me. That's what we saw in the preview for next week's episode, so I'm really going to be paying attention to see how that whole thing develops, because let's face it, that's exactly what Egbert did. He screwed Elia over. So now, the final death in this week's episode, and this is the one, once again, I have to question, what was the purpose of doing this? Edu. We got this week, apparently, in a fit-in, drugged rage, Ragnar killed Edu. And I have, now number one, that was the one I didn't see coming. I did not see that coming because there wasn't really any build up to it. There wasn't really any setup to it. It seemed to be just completely random, out of the box and out of nowhere. Now here's the thing, that does play well with what Ragnar has been going through and how he's been portrayed this season as sort of, you know, kind of falling into this madness, especially since he's under the influence of that opium. Now here's the thing though. I have to question, what was the point of this though? Why spend all this time with Edu? Why develop her into this confidant for Ragnar? Pretty much this surrogate Athelstan, if you will, because that's the role that she was playing in this season. Why spend all that time with her? Why spend all that time setting that up if you were just going to kill her off? And then kill her off and make her death seem like it doesn't really mean anything. Now, does that mean that Ragnar wouldn't be, you know, haunted by her ghost, if you will, or her memory, or the guilt for what he did? We don't know that yet, because I think that was one of the last scenes we saw of Ragnar in the episode. But even still, I mean, I can't imagine her death would have any sort of the same type of impact that Athelstan's death had on Ragnar, because they were actually friends. So I just have to question, why would the writer spend all that time on that character if this was the end game? I don't know if it was done for shock value, because if that was the case, you know, the false death that we got for Bjorn in this episode, which I thought that was just a cheap way to sort of get us to react, kind of like a jump scare. You know, if shock value was what they were going for, that would have been more shocking than Edu. Why? Because Bjorn is a fully developed main character. Edu, an underdeveloped supporting character. Her character doesn't have that much weight to begin with. So I don't know what they were doing with that. That's going to end it for my Vikings episode review. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. And in the comments below, leave your thoughts on this week's episode. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, you guys will be getting my top 5, the return of the top 5 video segment. I know I'm late with this upload, but top 5 will be up tomorrow. And then Monday, you will be getting the return of discussion of the week. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off. And until next time, peace.